Hey everyone, back again with the second installment of the Dungeon Speedrun Breakdown series. Today we're going to be talking about Pit of Heresy in 501 by Excluded, Crow, and Array. Now before we get started with the POV breakdowns, I wanted to talk about two things in my intro. First, this run is from 18 months ago, which is a long time by speedrunning standards, and the current unsubmitted record is actually about 30 seconds faster. It's like a mid-4. Now, I will discuss the strats that have occurred in the last 18 months, but some of the teams that have already beat this time, there have been multiple, they're just not kind of comfortable with the final time that they've achieved. One of these teams actually recently had a member have to go into military service. So, life happens, things change. But I will discuss all the strats that have, occurred in the last 18 months that have been created since this time was dropped. Now, like Throne, obviously, most of the routing is faster due to faster swords, enhanced vortex, eager edge swords. But besides that, there's a couple other things that have changed, and I will detail all of them in this video. Number 2, as we open our first POV here, which is going to belong to Crow, you'll notice that the team composition is going to be 2 Warlocks and 1 Hunter. Now, you might be wondering, why 2 Warlocks? Why not 1 Warlock like in Throne or like maybe some other dungeons? Well, Pit of Heresy actually has kind of a good compatibility, let's say, with Warlocks. A lot of the mechanics in this dungeon are gated behind being able to kill mini-bosses with pit relics, and these relics can be buffed and debuffed very easily by Warlock through stuff like Radiant, Well, and Fellwinter's Helm. So Warlock's really good here. So your second question might be, well, if Warlocks are so good, why not 3 Warlocks? Why do you have a Hunter? Well, the Hunter's actually here for a specific reason, and it's to kill the first Swordbearer that spawns in the A room during Necropolis, because that Swordbearer kind of dictates the pace of the encounter, and I will explain why when we get there. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and watch our first peek at Pit of Heresy in 501 using Crow's POV. So right at the start of the dungeon, right, we have them all lined up here. The timer starts, and Excluded is going to make his way over by jumping on a rock to his left. It's off camera, and he shatterlines off that rock to get to this opening kind of seal here. And this seal that's covering this hole, obviously once it detects a player, a couple seconds later, it opens itself and you can drop through. Now, one small change here in the final shape, well, it's not really something that came out in the final shape, but people started doing it now. You throw a touch of Winter Duskfield straight down and you shatterline off of it, which is slightly faster than what Excluded is doing here. Just a small change that I thought you should know about. Now, Pit, unlike most dungeons, is very vertical, right? And so this means that being able to move downward fast and upward fast is very helpful. Downward in this case, Phoenix Dive, Shadow Dive. Upward in other cases, Heat Rises. Now, something that you'll see them do a lot in this run is something called dive swapping, or I like to call it dive swapping. And what it is if you use Phoenix Dive or Shadow Dive, and then you open your inventory and you swap subclasses so that you no longer have access to that ability, you keep the downward momentum from the Phoenix Dive, but you're no longer in the animation so that when you touch the ground, you don't have to actually hit the ground and stay on it in that dive animation, which is helpful because in this case, you can see Crow, he cleverly uses it to transfer his downward momentum from gravity into horizontal momentum, which allows him to bounce through this kind of rocky terrain, which can otherwise be difficult to navigate. And this speed is also a lot faster than just, switching to your sword and using Eager just for that kind of long distance travel. So as you can see here, he's going to make his way through these winding paths. He's got a very particular route where he's hitting specific rocks, specific walls at an angle. And pit entrance is kind of nice to see because it's kind of just calculated, right? Everyone's just taking their own angle here, and everyone's got their own little mini entrance route. Now, one thing real quick here, right, that changes in modern strats compared to this run from 18 months ago, Crow's roll actually skips this flag now. Now, I mentioned how Warlock has access to, Radiant, Well, and all that stuff. The Well is not actually required, it just makes it easier for Crow's roll. And it is faster for him to actually skip this flag and go straight to the A relic, which will be killed and dropped by Excluded. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. It makes the Knight more annoying if Crow gets the Knight, but we'll talk about that when we get to the Knight here. So Crow's going to drop down. And remember how I mentioned earlier how Excluded, he is on Hunter because he needs to kill this first Swordbearer as fast as possible. So the reason for this is because the way Swordbearers work in the Necropolis encounter, Excluded after he kills this first Swordbearer, which always spawns in A room, a second Swordbearer will always spawn in the chair room, which is where Array is going, Isle of Garden, that's where Array is going, and it spawns on a timer after Excluded kills this first Swordbearer. So Excluded killing this first Swordbearer, they actually duo this encounter, Crow and Array, so you only need 2 swords. So spawning that second sword in allows the other person's roll to start working on those 2 mini-bosses as quickly as possible, right? And that's kind of going to dictate the pace of the encounter. If you only need 2 swords, then obviously spawning them as quickly as possible is very important. And excluded being on Hunter, he can completely skip any flag interaction, and he can shatter skate straight to this first room. So as you can see here, Crow's going to go ahead, he's going to go into this room, he's going to go ahead and grab this sword, and obviously the Swordbearer was killed by excluded earlier, and you'll notice here, Crow's actually able to fake skate and Icarus dash skate with the pit relic in hand. Now, if you ever tried this using traditional like 1-3 binds, aka like swap to kinetic, swap to power weapon binds, then the way you would normally sword skate, you'll notice that it drops the relic. In Destiny, when you switch weapons, it drops the relic. However, pit runners discovered that if you use next previous weapon binds to fake skate with the relic and you do the inputs fast enough, you don't actually drop the pit relic, which is very helpful on Warlock because it allows you to have a little advantage over the other 2 classes by allowing you to sword skate essentially normally with a pit relic instead of just having to like jump and swipe, which is kind of lame, right? So Crow's able to get this nice kind of burst of momentum here using the pit relic. He's on Starfire with Touch of Flame. He uses that plus 1 aerial heavy to blow up the pit keeper, and he makes his way here to the knight. Now, one more change that I want to talk about here, Crow is going to make use of this quick jump light attack spamming in order to kind of kill this knight as quickly as possible. If he were to just spam left click on the ground, he has a high risk of piercing, which he still will pierce, as you can see here, but it's a lot more manageable and allows him to more quickly attack the knight by just spamming jump and light attack, right? Another change here from this run that is now used by people who are running pit, they are on Felrunner's Helm, and they kind of, I believe, like snap the knight, and the ignition killing the nearby adds debuffs the knight, which allows you to get a little bit of a faster kill. Now, Crow's roll, obviously not having a well makes this a little bit more annoying if his roll gets the knight, because well obviously converts your weapon damage into super damage. Super damage is over penetrating. The knight has a shield. If you get unlucky and a bunch of your swords contact the shield, you'll get immunes, which is kind of annoying. So the well makes that kind of nicer, but unfortunately Crow's roll doesn't have this anymore. But again, it depends on whether his roll gets the knight or not. So let's go ahead and keep watching here. And Crow, because he was fortunate enough to only get 1 mini boss here on his side, he is going to travel over and he's going to kill the final pit keeper, which will of course be spawned in once Array is done killing both of the other mini bosses. So you might be wondering here, how do you actually distribute the players across these rooms? So for those of you who are not familiar with how Necropolis works, there's 5 rooms, right? You have 2 on the left, you have 1 in the middle, and then you have 2 on the right. Okay, so basically each Warlock takes 1 side, and if one Warlock has all 3 of the mini bosses on their side, really bad RNG. So ideally what you want to happen is you want one person to get the Wizard, and the other person to get the Shrieker and the Knight, because the Shrieker and the Knight are the 2 fastest, the Wizard's the slowest. Obviously Wizard and Knight are much slower than Shrieker, so if one side had Wizard Knight, that would be really bad. And then this person who gets the singular mini boss, they are responsible for killing the pit keeper. As you can see, Crow is doing that, while Array handles the other 2 mini bosses. So that is pretty much it for first encounter. That's also pretty much it for Crow's POV for now, so we're going to switch over to Array's POV, so we can go ahead and take a look at what I mean by when I say these Swordbearer spawns are manipulated. So Array, he does entrance pretty normally, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip past it. Now, Array's role in modern times would still actually get this flag here. He'd place it for himself, and he's going to make his way straight to Chair, right? Chair is quite a far distance away. It'd be very difficult to make this kind of crossing without a well skate. So he's going to go over here. He's going to go ahead and kill this pit keeper, and he's going to make his way into Chair. And you'll see here in just a second, because Excluded was quite fast, he's going to place his well, and the Swordbearer is going to spawn in now, right? So as you can see, if Excluded is even faster with like a vortex frame with a better entrance route, this Swordbearer would spawn in even faster, which would make Array's roll even faster, thereby speeding up Necropolis. So the other thing that you can do in this dungeon, and you're going to see this again on Zulmak because similar bosses, but wizards make this smoke cloud, which makes it difficult to jump, right? And so players can abuse this difficulty in jumping by basically jump spamming with right clicks inside this kind of smoke cloud. So you can see it here. Boom, he's just spamming aerial attacks, which makes this kill quite rapid, right? Which is pretty nice. Okay, so that is that for Array's POV. We're going to move on to Excluded's POV next. Now, Excluded's POV, like I said, he kills that first Swordbearer by shatter skating, right? So he shatter skates. We're going to skip past this entrance section here. He's going to kill the first pit keeper in front of A, and he's going to go ahead and Izzy that Swordbearer, and he's going to move on. Next, he is going to, I believe, leave on skip. Oh no, he actually helps kill this third pit keeper here. Yeah, just in case that's needed. Yeah, he goes ahead and kills that. And he's going to move on to leave on skip here, right? So this skip is, you know, it's pretty standard. He just kind of goes oob, throws a crystal to launch himself over here so he doesn't get stuck. And then if you guys are not aware of this kind of pit oob, you can get out through the wall and make your way to the Labyrinth. So while his teammates are duoing the first encounter, Excluded is making his way over here, and he's going to go ahead and wipe his teammates to the Ogre's load zone. So you'll see here in just a second here. Wait for it. He's going to wait for his teammates to call that the encounter is over, and as soon as the encounter is over, he's going to die and he's going to wipe. Now, something interesting about dungeons compared to raids is that their wipe screens are only 7 seconds long, about 7 seconds long, whereas raids are 17 seconds long, much longer, right? So it's a lot more viable to do wipe pulls in dungeons than it is in raids, because the 7 seconds that you spend on the wipe screen, maybe plus the lock timer going down as well, so maybe 12 seconds, is a lot shorter than if Crow and Array had to travel their way through all the doorways, through the kind of little thin crack that Excluded went through, and join him in the maze, right? So it's a lot easier to just wipe pull. They're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to go ahead and go straight into Labyrinth, okay? Now, the way Labyrinth works is a little interesting, okay? So there's 4 rooms. There's 4 rooms that have knights which spawn balls in Labyrinth, okay? And obviously you only need 3 balls to open the doors to start the chamber encounter. So what do these guys do? Well, there's an interesting mechanic that you can use that people kind of found out around the time of this run, a little bit beforehand, that allows you to reuse, I should say, these Labyrinth balls in the chamber encounter, which speeds up the dungeon significantly. So these guys are going to go ahead and dunk all around at the same time. Excluded's going to line over on Hunter, and he's going to place a permaflag, right? Now, I want to draw your attention to this map of the Chamber of Suffering / Labyrinth encounter. Shout out to Samzila for making this, of course. The top row of this map here shows the roles of the old run, so Array, Crow, and Excluded, versus the newer run strats that people are using. So I'll talk about the Chamber of Suffering in a second, but let's actually go ahead and zoom in on one of these in particular. So as I said, there's 4 rooms, right? These 4 little cells that the knights spawn in that drop the balls. And so you use 3 of them to actually open the doors, but there's a 4th knight and he doesn't despawn when you start Chamber of Suffering. Now, for whatever reason, Samzila told me that another reason why you wipe pull to this encounter instead of just having everyone transition on top of it just being really slow is because when you wipe pull to this encounter, it actually makes it so that 4th knight, when you kill him, his ball doesn't despawn and he doesn't go immune, right? So the knights will just go immune if you don't wipe pull for some reason. So that's why they wipe pull as well. So basically what you do is you would kill knights 1, 2, and 3, and you would use all of them to open the door, right? And once you open the door, you have a person spawn camping knight 4. They're waiting by knight 4. Once the encounter starts, they kill it, and they use its ball on the actual dunk spot for the Chamber of Suffering totem plate, right? Now, the interesting thing here is that for whatever reason, if you wipe pull and you kill all 4 of these knights, the game thinks you're still in the Labyrinth encounter, right? And the ogres are spawned and everything, so the game thinks you're still in the Labyrinth encounter. And because of that, it starts a timer and spawns in 4 new knights. Spawns in 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you might see where this is going, because, when you kill these knights and they drop a ball in the Labyrinth encounter, and you use it to open the door for Chamber of Suffering, the balls are the same type of balls, right? They drop from the same kind of knights. So you can use these balls on top of the naturally spawning ones from left, middle, and right that take a really long time to speed up the Chamber of Suffering encounter. So pretty interesting stuff. Now, I will know that there are some important routing differences that have saved a lot of time in the Chamber of Suffering encounter, which make it so that the encounter is done a lot faster and so that skip matters a lot more now. So one thing to note here is that Crow's role in particular, which is this green Warlock, has to access this top left room here. And this top left room, it's quite far away to reach that room and to drag the ball over all the way to the totem plate. And so eliminating this room by being able to reuse this top right room instead and making better use of skip pathing is one of the more optimal decisions that newer teams have made to pit that has made this encounter a lot faster. So I'll show you what that looks like in practice as well. On top of that, thanks to the final shape and some other changes, people have discovered a tech called eager transferring, which doesn't get talked about too much because it's a more modern tech. But basically what that entails is if you pull out an eager edge sword and then you use an animation that allows you to swap weapons during an animation, for example, dodge or blink or rift, which you'll see both of in this clip, it allows you to transfer eager edge to another weapon. Notably, Ergo, the exotic sword, can now get eager on it by transferring, or relics. Relics are also swords, anything with some sort of melee attack. You've probably seen the grapple melee skate thing that people are doing. That also involves eager transfer. It's the same tech, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like right now. So let's go ahead and open Sam Chamber here. This is Samzila basically doing Excluded's role, but with the new optimized routing. But there's a couple changes to Hunter that make it a little bit more optimal, I suppose, for Chamber of Suffering now. Obviously, you can be on Stasis, but being on Prismatic allows you access to Grapple and Blink, both of which he uses very effectively. So let's go ahead and show you what I mean by that. So he's going to go ahead and kill this knight. So on top of being able to kind of skate a little bit with the relic, he is actually able to use Blink to navigate the chamber area a lot more effectively. Now on top of that, of course, you can grapple while you're holding a pit ball. So let's go ahead and see Sam do that as well. He's going to go ahead and grapple straight through here. Pretty cool stuff. And then of course, the most impressive tech of all is going to be Eager Transfer. Very cool stuff. So the skip roll obviously drops off a relic for Sam. A lot of dropping off of relics in this encounter, even in the old POVs. And so you can see here, Sam pulled out his sword. Let me go back here. He pulled out his sword, he dodged, and then he swapped to his horseman mid-dodge. And by doing that, he has Eager Edge on his horseman, but now he's going to have Eager Edge on this pit ball. So then boom, he hits 1 skate, 2 skate, boom. Look at that, right? Pretty crazy, pretty fast stuff, right? Now you might be wondering, how does that ball even get dropped off there? Well, that's the ball, if you're paying attention, from the skip roll that gets brought around from the top right side. So I have another clip here called Daisy Skip. We're going to go ahead and look at it here. And you'll see, again, this person pulls out their sword, they place a rift, they swap weapons, and then they pick up the ball, and then boom, look at that. Crazy fast skate there with the ball. They drop the relic, and then they do skip straight from this ledge, right? So this is a pretty fast skip route as well. Which is pretty important because the Chamber of Suffering encounter is a lot faster now with these new strategies that are more optimally involved in terms of picking up balls and choosing where players decide to end up going. So essentially there are 3 roles here, right? You have the Hunter who starts the encounter by placing the perma flag. They route in, they grab a ball, they pick up the ball that was dropped by the Warlock. You have the Warlock who is getting this top right ball here and dropping it off for the Hunter. And then you have another Warlock who is grabbing actually a total of 4 balls, I believe. But they're very, very close to the actual chamber plate, so it's a lot easier for them to access. Now, for reference, this encounter, obviously, normally what you would do if you weren't like speedrunning is you would get left, you would get middle, you would get right, and then you would get left, and you would get middle, and you would get right. So it'd be like 6 nights worth of time, which is a very long time, right? This encounter is very long if you do it the normal way. In speeds, this encounter is so fast that by the time this middle knight actually spawns, the encounter is just about done. This right knight never even has time to spawn from the first wave. So really, really clever use of all of the kind of stuff that you have available to you, including all of these knights from the previous encounter, by exploiting the fact that if you wipe pull for whatever reason, the dungeon is like in a state of being in both the Labyrinth and the Chamber encounter at the same time, which allows you to reuse these previous knights, which is pretty cool stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and show you what Crow's roll does just to kind of show you the third POV here. Let's go ahead and skip forward into his kind of chamber roll. So again, basically what he's doing is he's grabbing balls from this center room. He's going to dunk them. I'm going to skip forward here a little bit. And he is going to make his way back into these central areas where these knights are respawning. He's going to go ahead and he's going to kill it as it spawns in. He's going to skate out and watch what he does here. He's going to go ahead and drop it, and he's going to head back in, right? So the rolls are a little different now, but Crow's roll basically is the one that is traversing through these tunnels and just getting the balls over and over. This is what I was talking about earlier. This room is very, very far away. So Crow having to access this room and then picking up a ball so he's even slower, right? No longer has access to Eager, right? Would mean that he has to go all the way back here to dunk the ball, right? So this is significantly slower than the current pathing that's used in most pit teams runs. So what is the result of this that you might be asking, right? So what is the point of all this? Well, if we go ahead and look at Array's POV, remember I told you that one Warlock, they kind of drop a ball and then they leave on skip. Well, Array is going to go ahead and do that skip right over here. Array is going to make his way to the outer right wall. He's going to well skate, and he's just going to heat rises his way out of bounds. And like you saw in that Daisy clip that I showed you earlier, he is going to make his way all the way over here. And you might notice that Array, he has a lot of time. He can change his loadout. He's kind of just sitting here, and he's waiting for a call from his teammates to drop down. So not only is skip faster now, but Chamber has sped up so much that if Chamber is really good, Sam has told me that you're basically gated to your skipper. Your skipper is going to be the one that is going to end up being late. They might not even need a dunk call in order to go down so that this joining allies goes away, right? And now we are in Harrow, or the Wizard's encounter. Okay, so obviously Chamber has changed a little bit since the time of its run. But Wizards has also changed a little bit, right? The route itself is a little bit faster. There's some slightly newer bounces and like skate lineups that people use because now they have enhanced vortex swords, like I mentioned. But besides that, a strategy that still remains to this day is death warping into Wizards. So you'll see here that Crow and Excluded have both died. And we've talked about death warps before in plenty of previous raid breakdowns. But basically what it is if you're starting an encounter and people in the load zone that the encounter is starting in, they die, their ghosts get moved to the starting position of the encounter. And so that's exactly what Crow and Excluded are doing here. They're going to go ahead and start a chain res, and Array's role is going to target the furthest wizard of all three callouts because he's obviously able to move first, given that he is revived people and that he is just kind of in the encounter already. And the other Warlock is probably going to get the second furthest one, while the Hunter gets the closest one to spawn. Now, an interesting thing here is that if we go ahead and look at Excluded's POV, so I'm going to go and flip over to Excluded's POV, let's skip straight over to Wizards. And so, like I mentioned, Excluded is going to die. He's going to be revived by Array while he's switching to Stasis. And you're going to notice something special here that's a little bit different from what I just said, right? So what's Excluded doing? He's going up on this ledge, dropping down, okay, using Horseman, killing the Wizard. Okay, makes sense, right? Next, he's going to travel over, going again, around the outside, gonna dodge, kill with Horseman. So why is Excluded killing two instead of just one wizard, like I mentioned, right? Wouldn't it make more sense to have 1-1-1? Well, to answer that question, we have to go ahead and look at Crow's POV. So we're flipping through a lot of POVs, but Crow, he's making his way through the wizard's encounter, and he is making his way all the way to the back of the map. He's going to the exit, right? And the reason for this is because if you have pretty good RNG, the Hunter can just get two wizards, or one of the Warlock can also get two wizards, right? You'd split 2-1. And then Crow here, he's going to die to this next load zone, which is a respawn restricted area, which will wipe pull his team to Zulmak. And like I mentioned, wipe pulls are pretty fast in dungeons, so this team at the time thought that this was the fastest way to execute the strategy. Nowadays, people do things differently. Nowadays, you split 1-1-1, so Hunter gets closest, the skip Warlock gets the furthest wizard, and the other Warlock gets the middle wizard, right? And then all three people transition to the exit, and all three people start Zulmak without a flag, right? So technically a little bit faster than wipe pulling. Wipe pulling, you have to wait through this kind of 12-second period, and it makes it so that no one needs to get two wizards in the wizard section of the dungeon. I'm going to go ahead and keep playing because the rest of the dungeon is pretty much the same today as it was back then. You just have your Warlocks prioritize getting the Wizard and the Knight, and the Hunter gets the Shrieker because it's the easiest one, with everyone skipping the flag here. So as you can see, Crow, he's just going to go ahead and pick up his relic. Small difference again, you're going to be using Fellwinters on these mini bosses as well as Radiant, as you see Crow is doing here. So he's just going to go ahead, he's going to kill this Wizard again. Same tech that Array was using on the entrance during Necropolis, he's just jump spamming in this smoke. And damage is done a little bit differently now. Back then, people would use Verity Warlocks. So one is on Galley, and the other is on like I believe like a solar waveframe in order to get stacks. So yeah, these guys are just spamming Verity, Touch of Flame fusion grenades. They're using a tether. These days, apparently what the strat is use a Fellwinter's debuff. So one of the Warlocks like snaps Zulmak or snaps a nearby ad in order to get a 30% debuff, or they use like a seasonal artifact 15% debuff, and they use surrounded GLs and rockets with the Hunter being on stasis, so they can, you know, stay on Shadow Dive and just use impetus with Horseman in order to kill the boss. So again, similar strategy to Necropolis, abusing the wells in order to kill the Wizard and Knight quickly. Damage is a little bit different, not Verity Rocket anymore as far as I'm aware, just kind of like raw weapon damage using Surrounded. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Pit. In terms of the other people's POVs in this encounter, they're pretty much doing what you would do during Necropolis. Excluded is just rallying on Tether, he's sword blocking in front of the Shrieker, and then kind of just going to middle doing damage. And Array is doing the same thing Crow is doing, just with the Knight, and just kind of left clicking his shield. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Pit. Maybe expect a lower 4-ish minute time in the semi-near future, probably sometime during the next couple seasons. And yeah, pretty cool dungeon. A little bit RNG heavy in the first encounter, a little bit on wizards as well. But the rest of the dungeon is pretty cool and now makes use of some pretty cool tech that we've showed you, for example, like eager transferring. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I suppose next up we're going to have Prophecy. Oh, that one's going to be fun. Okay, well, until then, I will see you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this little explanation of Pit.